Hello everyone, I'm Miss Sophia and one of the law lecturers that will be teaching legal skills and methods. And behind me is the Brotherton Library located at University of Leeds. And the name was given after the Lord Mayor of Leeds, Lord Brotherton. And it's interesting that I'm inside this library and giving a lecture on reading cases and statutes. Alright, so I hope all of you have been watching the video on referencing, because before I move on further on the lecture on reading cases and statutes, I would like all of you to recall back what you have learned with regards to referencing, and please do understand what are the advantages of referencing. So can you try to recall why do you need to reference and what are the benefits of referencing? Alright, so this is also a test for you to recall on how to footnote properly. So you have A, B, and C. If you can see from the manner that this question has been set, you can already tell that it's a citation for a textbook. So why is that? Because you have the name of the author followed by the title of the textbook and starts with the open bracket, the 11th edition. If you compare it to the journal article, there won't be 11th edition. It will be bracket year, volume, name of the journal, and the page number of the article that starts in that particular journal. So as you can see, which one is the correct answer? It's either A or B, definitely not C. And you guessed it right. So the correct answer would be B. Okay, let's do this. Question number 3. Which one is the proper referencing for bibliography? So as you can all know, when it comes to bibliography, the name of the author would start with the surname followed by the initial. So based on A, B, and C, which one would be the correct referencing style? So it's definitely not A, because you're not required to put the page number of the pages that you have referred to. So the correct answer would be B. Alright, so coming on to question number 4, can you name 2 consequences of plagiarizing? So for this section, I hope you have done some reflection after viewing the lesson on referencing. So if students are caught for plagiarizing, the consequences are very severe, because as an academic integrity officer myself, the student would face either a marks of 0, a resubmission, or even suspension, or even expelled from the program straight away. So you really do need to take referencing very seriously. Alright, well then everyone, so it's a good thing that all of you are able to recall back what you have learned on the topic of referencing. So for this lecture, so we'll be covering on how students need to read cases and also statutes. So I'm starting this lecture with the scenario where we have Mr. Johan Abdullah, formerly known as K. Mutu. So as you can see from the name itself, K. Mutu has converted to become a Muslim, and he also has converted 6 of his children 3 weeks after he has embraced Islam. So Sharia court has granted him custody soon after the conversion. So now, of course, his wife would be very unhappy, refused to accept the conversion, and now seeking for your advice. So what do you do? So where do you start? So in this type of situation, it best to start with the highest authority of law is the federal constitution itself. So under Article 160, 160 Federal Constitution defines law to include written law, common law, written law, common law, and federation, and any customs or usage that having force of law in the federation. So there are 6 main sources of law that students can consider in giving advice to clients, namely federal constitution, legislation, enactment, English common law, equities, judicial decisions, custom law, Islamic law. So these are the main 6 sources of law. So when we look into the English law itself, so what are the sources of law that lawyers can refer to? It includes legislation, or also known as statutes. So legislation would be known as the laws passed by federal parliament. enactment would be laws or regulation passed by the state parliament, and parties can also refer to cases, or also known as common law. So these are the judgment passed by judges. So other materials that lawyers or law students can refer to would be Helsbury Law of England and Wales, Hansard, Lord Commission reports, law journals, as well as textbooks. So you don't limit yourself to textbook only, but do explore other sources of law, journal articles, and all the lists mentioned on the slides itself in order to give very detailed and extensive advice to your client. So this is the hierarchy of courts. So it is best for you, in order to give advice to any parties, you always need to cite cases. But which one do you cite? You always start with the highest one, would be the UK Supreme Court, which has the highest source of law, and it will be followed by the other courts, the below Supreme Court. Whereas in Malaysia, the highest source of law would be Federal Court, followed by Court of Appeal, High Court, Session Court, and Magistrate Court. So these are just the distinction that you need to familiarize yourself with when you look at UK hierarchy of courts and also Malaysian legal system. So when it comes to doctrine of precedent, so you always look at the court hierarchy itself, because if you do your research, so if you see cases that's at the high court, you need to bear in mind whether or not that high court case has been overruled or not overruled. So you need to do additional research in order to determine whether or not the case is still valid. So that's why it's very important for you to cite the highest source of law, and preferably the latest one. So R and R 2020, and then this at a Supreme Court level. So that means that it is contain the highest authority and will be binding on all other courts. So same goes how judges in Malaysia applies doctrine of precedent in the Malaysian court hierarchy. So the decision on point of law by the appellate court would bind all the courts below the Supreme Court in UK or Federal Court in Malaysia. So based on the case Johan Abdullah itself, so we have somewhat similar case to the case of Indira Gandhi, a 2018 case. So whether the mother and the father of the child of civil marriage must consent to a conversion of the children. Because in this particular case, the father of the child converted to become a Muslim, and he also converted all of his children. So Sharia court upheld the conversion of the children, but because the parties went through a civil marriage, so then the wife brought the matter to High Court. So High Court then set aside the decision of the Sharia court. So of course, the husband or the father is not happy with the decision. So the matter went to Court of Appeal, and Court of Appeal upheld the conversion. So then the matter went up all the way to the Federal Court, and Federal Court reversed the decision, which means the conversion of the children is not valid. So it's very an interesting case, because in this case, Federal Court ruling has drawn a line under the debate whether or not Muslim parents can convert a child without the consent of the non-Muslim spouse. So in this case, court had to decide on the term parent. So when you look at the constitution, it cannot be read literally. So parent doesn't mean one parent, but it has to include both parents. So as both parents have equal rights to the future of their children. Alright, so now we're coming to how to read enactment. So enactment is passed by the state parliament. So this is just an example of enactment in the state of Perak. So as you can see, they have listed what is the long title and preamble. So how do you read long title and preamble? So long title would be the full title of the enactment itself, and the preamble basically means the explaining the purpose of the enactment. So same goes as reading legislation. You have Guardianship of Infants Act. That would be the short title, and you can see an act to provide for the guardianship of infants. So that will be actually the long title. Then be it enacted is the preamble of that particular legislation. So as you can see, the 23rd March is the date where this legislation has received the royal assent. So students, as you can see the circle part there, students always need to bear in mind the differences between act and bill. So act means that this legislation has passed through the House of Commons, House of Lords, and received royal assent. Whereas bill is actually in the process of going through both houses. So the ones that circled number one, that how students pronounce it would be section 1. Because some students, especially those who do not have background in law, they are not sure how to pronounce it in the essay, whether they should write number 1 or article 1. So when it comes to legislation, it's actually section 1. So this detailed example or explanation on how do you read legislation itself. So you have short title, chapter number, long title, date of the royal assent, and then the section as well as the heading for each section. All right, so you have section 1, and then if you can see bracket 1, how do you pronounce it? It's called subsection 1. So if the following after subsection 1, then you call it the paragraph. So in this case, if you want to refer to that section, he intentionally penetrates the vagina, for example. So then you can say as per section 1, sub 1, sub A. So that's how you pronounce it, and that's how you write it in the essay. All right, so this is how do you read Constitution. So an example I've given here, Federal Constitution. So with regards to the provision itself, so you don't pronounce it as section, but for Constitution, you refer it to article. So this is an example where I state there Article 1. So for the case of Indira Gandhi, because remember the federal court had to decide the term parent. So if you look at the federal constitution, Article 12, sub 4, mentioned that the religion of a person under the age of 18 years shall be decided by his parent. So if you literally interpret the term his parent, so are you referring only to a male child? Are you only referring to one parent? So these words need the interpretation by the judges. So there are there are many acts and legislation both in UK and in Malaysia itself. So in both UK and Malaysia, they have interpretation acts. So sometimes these interpretation acts will provide guidance on how to interpret particular words. So here in the section 4, so when it comes to gender, so section 4 sub 2 mention words importing masculine gender include females, because you can see just now the term his, right? So his basically include her as well. So how cases are cited? So I've put down here an example, civil cases. You have the name of the cases, bracket year, the volume number, the name of the law journal, followed by the page number. So when you pronounce civil cases, it will be Carlisle and Carbolic Smoke Ball, as opposed to criminal cases is R against Roberts. So it's not R versus Roberts. It's very particularly important when you do mooting. You need to make sure that your pronunciation is correct. Yeah. Same goes as Malaysian cases as well. So other types of cases that you can consider would be cases that's, for example, having long name like VP, recognition and registration of orders, or R against Secretary of State for the Home Department. So these are the examples of other types of cases, not necessarily civil or criminal cases, but the citation would be similar. So when you see all the law reports, you can use usually the abbreviation of the law report. So if you see AC, it stands for Law Reports Appeal Cases. If you see MLJ, then you can know that it's actually Malayan Law Journal. So these are the law reports that you need to familiarize yourself with. Not necessary to remember it, but at least you know what it stands for. Alright, so these are the judicial titles of judges in England. So you have Lord Chief Justice that sits in the Federal Court, You have Lord Justices that sit in his federal court as well, justices, which would be all the judges that sits in the high courts, and also the crown court and county court. Masters of Rolls would be the one who heads the court of appeal. So judicial titles in Malaysia would differ a bit. So you have Chief Justice of Federal Court would be the head of justices at the federal court level. And then after that, you have President of Appeal Court, Chief Justice of High Court in Malaysia, the ones that head of the High Court judges, and you also have separate Chief Judge for the High Courts of Sabah and Sarawak. Okay, now we're coming to the part how you read judgment. So you have citation, name of case, name of judges, catchphrases. So this is the summary of what are the keywords used in the judgments, and you have head notes and summary of the entire case itself. So you look into all of this in the first 2 pages to have a brief or quick understanding on what that case is all about. Alright, so how to read cases. So these are the tips. So you need to read this, skim through everything first, understand what the summary is about, then you write the citation properly, the name of the case, followed by year, volume, the law reports, and page number. And then you also need to be able to highlight on the facts of the cases and understand what are the remedies sought by the parties. So it's good if you can understand the prior proceeding of the cases if the cases that you're currently reading is at the Supreme Court level. Alright, so how to read cases continues for other these parts as well, which I'll go in detail in the classroom. Okay, so I look forward to seeing all of you because there are many other interesting that will happen when I see you face to face. So do read up more on how to read cases and statute, and I look forward to seeing everyone soon. Take care.